Hey, how's it going, everybody? So today we're going to talk about what kind of profile you need in order to have a chance at a decent law school. So we're going to look at the kind of GPA and LSAT score you would need in order to meaningfully consider getting into law school at a decent school. And when I say decent school, I mean a school that ranks within the top 100. And this is a pretty typical selection for most students and for most states. Being in the top 100 schools tends to be the schools that are decent enough or credible enough to be considered worthy of going to. That doesn't mean it's the only schools that are out there. There are certainly ones that are ranked lower that go in and out, and there's certainly some schools that people go to for night school just because it's more affordable for them to go to one of those lower schools. But by and large, the top 100 law schools are kind of considered the bread and butter of the experience for law school and the most credible schools generally. So with that in mind, we're going to focus on that top 100 law school entry and think of that as kind of the mainstream, mainline, decent law school selection. So in order to think about this, you kind of have to really see what the profiles are and the average scores are in most schools. And if you take a look at the range of scores in the top 100, you really need about a 160 LSAT and a 3.5 overall university GPA to kind of have a decent shot of getting into a good school within that top 100 that would likely meet the bill for where you want to practice in a particular state. Of course, this isn't the only score or GPA that could possibly get you in. It's just kind of a starting point for a decent profile that gives you some options. Of course, if you score higher than this, then more opportunities will open up. If you score lower than this, the opportunities are going to naturally slim down. But I just want to say that you don't have to freak out about this. If you're not exactly on those points, you can make up for things depending on whether you're lower or higher on your LSAT or your GPA, depending on what you can do. And I've seen this myself. I actually was coaching and mentoring an applicant just recently, and they had around a 3.3 GPA, which was not the best for law school, but okay. I mean, they went to a mainline, major university that's considered decent in the national college university sphere, but obviously not very competitive to have just a 3.3. You really need to bring it up in the LSAT, and they did, and I helped them pick the right class to study, and they ended up with a 175 LSAT. Now, of course, that is exceptional because that is the 75th percentile at Harvard, but because they worked really hard, they studied hard, they practiced and trained and did well on their LSAT, they were able to get a full ride to a decent private law school, that ranks, of course, well within the top 100 because of that improvement on the LSAT. Now, most people here are probably not going to be getting a 175 LSAT, but that said, if you are lower in your GPA, again, you're going to really need to work on that LSAT study in order to get on up to a point where you can kind of balance that out. So going to the lower spectrum, in other words, where you really should not be thinking about law school, is if you're definitely below 150 on the LSAT and below a 3.0 GPA. Now, on the GPA side, it is possible to, if you had a significant life event or emergency, or tragedy or trauma, to explain that in your writing. So, and I've seen this too. I've had other people who had this issue, and I, helped them with their letters of application. And a part of that was explaining a tragic life event, a parent dying or getting a really difficult illness that they had to overcome, and that affected their grades. Again, you can explain these things away potentially in your letter of intent, in your application letter, and if you have a decent enough LSAT score, you can kind of compensate. But if you don't have at least a B overall GPA from university, it really does put into question whether law school is for you at all, because again, you have to have the work ethic and the long-term orientation and the diligence to carry through with law school. It's 3 years plus the bar plus everything else that's going on. So it's really hard to think that if you don't at least have a B average from college, that you should really be going to law school. And on the LSAT, if you're at the 150 level, again, in the 150s, it gets kind of iffy about whether or not you should go. It's not like you can't, and it's not that people don't get 150s LSATs and whatever and go to a law school and become successful lawyers. It does happen, but again, your opportunities are slimmer. You're probably paying more for law school, there's going to be a debt issue there. So it is concerning if you're in that level. And by and large, I do say to anybody, if you can't get at least a 150 in the LSAT, you really shouldn't be going, because you don't have that logical reading ability. I mean, the LSAT is in my opinion, a very good test in terms of taking a look at someone's ability to just read and digest information quickly. It is definitely not the same as law school in terms of what you're doing, but it is kind of a good benchmark to see, are you ready to think critically, analyze information critically, map things out? And so in that way, practicing for the LSAT and training for it and building up your skill is almost in some ways like a prerequisite to clarifying your thinking. And many courses do this. They help you clarify how to break down words and analyze and think about deductive and inductive reasoning and thinking about making patterns for the logic games. But if you're not able to study and get yourself up to at least in the 150s, yeah, I mean, I really would not recommend it. I mean, because you're probably going to be paying through the nose for law school, and the odds are that you are going to be successful after are very slim. And a lot of these people who are in that low bracket sometimes are just career changers. They have money. They have a spouse with money. They can afford it to go to the law school. They can pay for it, and they can pay for the time to practice and then, eventually open up their own practice. Again, it does happen, but the statistical odds are very low. And it's probably not you. You know what I mean? In the end, it's probably not you, because if you already are in a career and you have money and you're good to go, why would you go to law school in the first place? If it's because it really interests you and you've always wanted to, okay, that's fine. But if you can't get yourself up to that score level where you're at least kind of in the profile of the curve that would make sense to fit, within the school and be competitive, I mean, it'd be very difficult. So again, if you have below 150 LSAT or below a 3.0 GPA, law school probably is not for you. Maybe if, again, your GPA was due to a traumatic event, a family member dying and that causing a GPA issue, and you're, out of the classes and so forth, you had, fails or withdrawals. Maybe you had a special sickness or cancer or something. Again, that's real. It happens. Some people have that and it affects their grades, but then, they come back. But yeah, I mean, it's just really going to be hard for you otherwise. Now, of course, on the higher end, that is if you're looking to be okay, well, what does it take to get to a higher level school? I would say that, if you get in the 164 arena LSAT, the 3.6 plus GPA, you're starting to look at schools that are, in the higher range, something with in the top 50 for sure. And, it's something that could potentially get you into near T14 schools, but again, it's kind of in that middle ground there. Something in the early to mid 160s, something above 3.5 GPA, 3.6, 3.7. You're starting to look at some more competitive schools. If you're looking to go to the T14 level, these are considered the top 14 law schools that usually pretty much stay the same. They switch in and out, but usually the same players. You're definitely going to be looking at a top end LSAT and GPA. We're typically talking an LSAT minimum 167 around. We're talking a GPA that's 3.6 and change, maybe near 3.7 plus. And then if you want to get into what would be considered an elite school, these are your typical top end Ivy League schools, or schools that are just always in the top kind of 5 or 6, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Chicago, Columbia. You're now definitely looking in the 170s for your LSAT. You're looking at GPAs that are 3.8, 3.9, even near 4.0 if you magically or amazingly pulled that off, which if you did engineering, that's pretty rare. But yeah, and engineers do get a boost too. So if you have a lower GPA, but you were in engineering, you were mechanical, industrial, electrical, that's actually a little bit of a boost, because in many colleges, 3.3 is considered honors for engineering. So that's something to consider too. But, again, you really need to be in that high level, that 99th percentile plus level in the 170s for the LSAT. In the 3.8, 3.9, 4.0 arena for, again, your top tier law schools. Those top 5 or 6. Of course, there's always going to be some special exceptions. especially, based on different types of scholarships or special status scholarships. This does happen, based on national origin or race or, whatever there might be, disability, like, people who had a certain issue and they overcame that. Sometimes they accept in applications that have a little bit lower than usual LSAT GPA combos. But again, by and large, not going to happen. Like for most people, it's not typical. So again, just kind of summarizing here, if you want to get into a decent law school, again, I did define decent to be something within the top 100. You really want to be shooting around 3.5 GPA, 160 LSAT. Again, you can get in the 150s. You can get in with a little bit less of the 3.5, but you're probably going to be paying a bit more to do so. Unfortunately, you're going to definitely pay more. And to get into the higher, upper echelon of schools, you're going to need to be in your upper 160s to 170s. On the LSAT, you're going to need to have a GPA that's well above 3.6 plus on your overall. Definitely starting to get 3.7, 3.39 if you're getting into your T14 schools, that kind of thing. So definitely though, I still recommend this to anybody who's going. It really is not worth it generally to go to law school unless you're going for free or near free these days, because the competition's way too high in the market. A lot of people are struggling to pay their student loans more than ever because everything's been ballooned thanks to the government subsidization of loans. So I tell anyone who has an ear and will listen, go for the scholarships, go for the full rides as much as possible. I know it's very tempting in the internet chatter. A lot of people like to flex and pretend like, oh, you're nothing if you don't get into a T14 or you don't get into Ivy League. It's just like, it's so ridiculous and so out of touch with reality. It's a joke because, again, most lawyers are not going, by virtue of the number of lawyers practicing and going out there, most lawyers are not graduating from a T14 school. Most lawyers are graduating from something in the top 100 that's not T14, right? And that's what most people, are doing and practicing. So the realistic outcome for most people is to not be going to, Harvard or Yale. So, unless you got into those schools, one of those top schools, and finances are overall okay, you really should consider how to go to law school for free or near free in terms of, getting scholarships if you can, because the economy plus, the expenses, it could really be painful for your wallet to be trying to pay those student loans and the ballooning interest if you actually had to pay for it going to. And I know that firsthand. I can tell you firsthand, it is not fun. I got scholarships, but I wish I had gone for more. I wish if I could change one thing about what I did in the past, I wish I took a different LSAT prep course, because the one I took, I foolishly did on price because they were a new one. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll save some money. But looking back and realizing they weren't really the best option, I shouldn't have done their program. I should have studied a little bit longer, and unfortunately, I stuck with that. But again, my profile and stuff still got me into a top 50 school. But I could have, done the same thing, but have gotten some more scholarships than I did. And, that's one of the things I always want to tell other people is go for the full ride if you can. Like, please do. Like, study, get, it doesn't matter if you go to a school that's, ranked 60 instead of, 40. You know what I mean? It's really not going to make that big of a difference in your life. The question is, how can you get that same degree, pass your bar exam, and now boom, okay, you have no debt. Well, great. You know what I mean? Your options are open. You can do what you need to do to work your way up, or if you have to take a lower salary to get the experience. It really is crazy what people are doing, thinking that going to law school is going to somehow make it rain for them, when by and large, for a lot of people, it's not. And a lot of people end up leaving and not practicing after just a few years. So I hope that helps everybody here think through their LSAT and GPA profile and what options they have. And if you have any thoughts or questions, definitely, you can message me down below. I'm happy to talk about things and also do consultations if someone wants to do a more official thing. All right, take care, everybody, and I'll talk to y'all later.